up to chapter 3, but I wanted to go over a few things in chapter 2. So let's see. Chapter 2 talked about the passing of Shaul HaMelech. Shaul died, and it turned out that not everyone agreed to accept David HaMelech as king, but instead there was a person by the name of Avner that promoted Ishbosheth to be king. And the reason why Ishbosheth, who was another son of Shaul, the reason why he was sort of like a competition, the reason why Avner wanted him to be king was because the pasuk says that there'll be kings that will come forth from you, and because of that, it says Anikel Shakai prayer ve, and kings will come from you, and that's referring to Benjamin. Now the problem was Benjamin wasn't born yet, and the only king that they had so far from Benjamin was Shaul. And since it uses the plural, kings will come from you, and this was a blessing given to Jacob before Benjamin was born, it implied that there will be two kings that will come from Benjamin and not just one. And therefore, there was reason to say that maybe Shaul's son should also be king. Now,
he's the only surviving son.
Right, that's what it seems like, correct. And ultimately, what it ends up that, of course, in the end, David HaMelech is finally accepted, but it takes years.
Yeah.
Now, one of the big questions here is how long did Ishbosheth reign? So in verse Yud, pasuk Yud, verse 10, it says Ishbosheth was 40 years old when he ruled over the Jewish people, and he ruled for 2 years. But Judah went after, was loyal to David, and David was in Hebron over the house of the tribe of Judah for 7 years and 6 months. So the question is, you're not really filling in the full story here, because we understand that there's 2 years for the people following Ishbosheth, and we've got 7.5 years for the followers of David. So what happened in the other 5 years for the people of Ishbosheth? In other words, it's leaving a little mystery over here. What happened? So in the commentaries in the Gemara, they actually argue as to which 2 years of the 7 years was Ishbosheth's king. Was it the beginning years of David's reign in Hebron, or was it the end 2 years of David's reign in Hebron? Again, David ultimately will be king over all of Israel, but until he reaches that stage, it was 7 years. These 7 years, he's only king of Hebron, and in Hebron, he's really in charge of the people of Judah, of his tribe, his own tribe, and Ishbosheth is really sort of like the king over the entire Jewish people. So this is an argument Rashi and Tosfos on the Rabbi. Yes. Yes, I'm listening.
Did he do anything? Did he do anything significant during the 5 years that he was sort of the king?
You mean
Is there anything
Ishbosheth
written-
during the 2 years? You mean 2 years, that Ishbosheth was king
Yes,
for 2 years? Did he
Yes.
do anything
2
significant?
years, I'm sorry, right, 2 years.
Yeah, not really, not that we know of. Not that I know of, at least. Now, what we do know also is
Okay.
that Ishbosheth was not really a major king. It was really, he was like a puppet. And the real person who was running the show was his, the commander, which was Avner. He was really running the show. So, and what we see later,
I
And
think
we'll-
he was a handicapped man.
No, it-
Ishbosheth.
No, it was a son of Jonathan who was handicapped.
one of the relatives of Shaul was,
Oh,
yeah.
Jonathan.
But thank you. But we will see later that this Avner sort of considers himself a quasi king. Like he's, even though Ishbosheth officially, he's just claiming Ishbosheth is the king. But we will see in chapter 3 that he does seem to feel somewhat a king himself, or some high, he has some power that, that he's close to the king. But here, he's really presenting it as if Ishbosheth is the king. And as I was mentioning, Rashi and Tosfos argue if this is the first 2 years of David's kingship is when Ishbosheth is around, or is it the last 2 years of David's reign on Hebron that Ishbosheth is ruling over all of Israel. Now, I will mention that the Metzudas David says something interesting. One of the commentaries here on the verse, he says that on all of Israel he ruled for 2 years, but for the other years he didn't rule over all of Israel. He ruled over only parts. In other words, it took time till he convinced people that they should follow Ishbosheth, until Avner he was the promoter. So Avner was sort of like promoting them. So that sort of like gives a somewhat of a reconciliation to this contradiction, this vagueness that we find here, that it doesn't really tell us about the other 5 years. So the Metzudas David sort of explains that he slowly became king over each of these areas, different cities, and he tries to fit it within the verses. Why it says he was king over all of Israel, he was king over these cities, because it took time until he ultimately became king over all of Israel. And when he was king over all of Israel, then he ruled for 2 years. Now, if you think about the other views, that really he was only king for either 2 years in the beginning or 2 years in the end of those 7 years. So let's think about that. David is king over in Hebron, and what it seems is that he's not pushing to be king over the entire Israel. He's not trying to, he's not really working hard to present himself as king over all Israel. Let's say, for example, Ishbosheth is not king for the first 5 years, and then he decided to become king. Avner convinced him. So what was going on with David for those 5 years? I'm just presenting a thought. Again, I don't have a source, a clear source. I'm just thinking about this. If he was king, David was basically meant to be king. He was already anointed by Shmuel, so he knows this is God's will. But yet he's not really promoting himself to say, listen, you don't have any other king. I mean, why doesn't everyone just accept me? He's not really doing that. He's not sending out his people. At least we don't see that he's sending out his people to accept him as king. And what it seems like is from his great humility and his interest in allowing Ishbosheth to decide if he wants to, take over at some point. In other words, David is sort of waiting for this sign, maybe from heaven, that he's to either make him that he should be king over all of Israel, or he wants to show respect to Shaul's son Ishbosheth, So he's sort of waiting for him to make his, decide if he wants to run for king or not, but it seems like there's some level of humility there on David's part. That's one thought. And even if you think about it the other way, let's say Ishbosheth was king for the first 2 years, and then we'll soon see later that he's killed. So ultimately, for 5 years after that, it seems that maybe that David is, or people are not accepting him, but there's years that go by where David is not accepted over all of Israel. Is that because he's acting humble and he doesn't want to go do more than what God tells him? Clearly, that God hasn't told him to be king over all of Israel yet, even though he was anointed. Yes, Ben.
I wanted to say maybe he's patient with Ishbosheth because of Jonathan that made a deal with him not to hurt his family.
Right. The thing is with the deal, I'm not sure if it applies to Jonathan's brothers or Jonathan's children.
Well, family is family.
Maybe. Did he mean immediate family? Did he mean, I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, Anna, yes.
I believe that Abner was a very, very powerful man that has many influential connections with different, because he was not only a very well-known warrior, but he was just in general a very strong and powerful person. And I think Abner was he was very much against David when he was with Shaul and tried to convince people that, David doesn't deserve that he felt that it's a really strong competition. So in my opinion, Abner was just holding all the strings to see who will win, if he will have even though he knew that he was not anointed by God, but he still felt that it's in his power to control. All these years, I don't think that David believes that he has enough strength, enough competition to go against Abner. I think that it was just time when both of them had to decide what would be the strongest part of this duel.
Yeah, it's not so simple. In other words, to decide what, for us to be sure of what was going on in David's mind. I don't know if I would agree with that. It's an interesting thought that you say, Anna. I don't know if I would agree that David was nervous to fight Avner because he was so influential. David fought Goliath. David was fighting nations, big nations. David was bringing, in order to marry his wife, he had to bring 100 circumcisions of 100 Plishtim.
Right.
I don't know that David was. I think he was fearless. I don't think he was worried of Avner. I think it was respect. I think, and the question is, was Avner wrong for starting this, or was Abner doing it sincerely, thinking that this is the meaning of the verse?
No,
and he
I
wanted
don't
to
think
fulfill.
No,
So the question.
Abner had so many signs of someone who was just power hungry, or even a control freak, much more than just having a.
I don't know. David was willing to forgive him, and I believe he was a very he was a righteous person. Maybe I don't see why we shouldn't think so. And David was very saddened when Yoav killed him, which we'll see later. Mm-hmm. So it's not so simple. Not so simple. Yes, David.
Yeah, I'm wondering who was the prophet at that time and what was his interactions and interplay during this period of time between David and Ishbosheth?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's one of the mysteries of the Tanakh that we don't always know. Whatever it tells us, we know, and if it doesn't say about what the prophets were saying, did they go to the prophet? Did they ask the prophet? Did the prophet get any revelation from God, or was there nothing for them to share because they didn't have any insight from God? So these are questions that throughout Tanakh that you wonder. I'm just throwing some thoughts there. Another thought that comes to mind, when we're dealing with David HaMelech, again, we went through the verses last week, and so now we're just talking a little more about the outside of what a little review of last week. Anyway, another thought that comes to mind. So we have David HaMelech, who is not becoming king over the entire Jewish people for 7 years. What are the people really thinking? And this is also an interesting topic to delve into. What are the people really thinking here? Because do they really think of David as a very righteous person? See, we are, our hindsight is 2020. We know who David HaMelech was, but the people living there at the time, do they have a positive look at David, or in something negative? And let me throw a thought a little thought, and that is, who did David join forces with during his running away from Shaul? He joined forces with the Plishtim, Achish, the king of the Plishtim, the brother of Goliath. What do you think the Jewish people thought about that? Do you know David almost fought the Jewish people? There was a war, and that's the war that killed Shaul. David was almost part of that war physically, and it was a miracle that he ended up slipping away. That they told him not to come. In the end, it was like a last moment decision. It was so David has some negative. There's certain negative marks on his reputation, even though, of course, we know that he was the holiest of holy at this point. We're able to see that, but we have to realize that the people of the day, they saw a few things, and knowing that he's joining forces with the Plishtim, knowing that Shaul was very against him, that also was like he must have done something wrong to Shaul. Why would Shaul be so against him? So there's all these different. There are certain thoughts that might have been going through people's minds about David, and they might not have been convinced of David's righteousness. And so that's something that we should take into consideration, that that might be what's going on and what's taking time for David to finally be accepted to the people. Yes, Isaac.
I agree completely. I mean, if you look at it from the perspective of the people who were there, who even necessarily heard of David. Okay, the only thing they probably heard of David was the business with Goliath. So obviously he had chutzpah, he had strength, he had whatever. So he was a big hero on that. But later on, as you say, he was with the Pelishtim. You don't know, but I think the important thing is what you see here, at least from the Divrei of Tanakh. David waited, obviously, until he got the word and direction from Hashem as to what to do. If not, he was basically just sitting tight. What's his name? Yoav, on the other hand, you see he's constantly making decisions. He's constantly doing. He's coming. He's going. He's talking. He has his own cheshbon of what he's doing. He may have been a righteous person, but obviously had an ego in there too that he was using to push. That's all.
So we have yet to see the Yoav's involvement, but yes, okay, we'll have to look into that. But yes, thank you for sharing your agreement to these thoughts. So now we're gonna continue with the well, I want to, before we continue with chapter 3, I did want to mention one more thing. That, or maybe more than one thing. First of all, the war that they each chose, there was this war that took place. They were doing a wrestling match. Avner had 12 people from the Ishbosheth's army, and Yoav had 12 people from the David's army. And so they had a little like supposed to be like a play. They were going to have a little playtime, a wrestling match. And the Medrash says that why was Avner killed? In the end, we'll see Avner is killed, and it's because he referred to the spilling of blood of young soldiers as playing. So Avner had come up with this idea that let them play. Of course, this was a mistake. This was a big mistake on his part. You know how they have this, the young soldiers let them come and do a little play before us. The Yisachaku is the Hebrew words. Mischak is playing, Misachik. And so he called it playing, and the fact that he referred to spilling of blood as playing, that's why he deserved death. And according to that, it implies that maybe he did have in mind to have, he called the spilling of blood playing. Did he really have in mind that they should kill each other? So that's on the other hand, a little contrary to the way I was thinking of it earlier, but that's a medrash that gives a little of that. So that sort of fits a little with Anna's way of understanding Avner. Yes, David.
Is the word sachek, playing, related to the word shachting? Shachet means slaughtering, killing?
I don't think so.
It's the same letters or different letters?
No, the last letter is different. Kuf and Tes.
All right.
So, and then the other point is that they did have in mind to the fact that they chose 12, each of them chose 12, it implies like there was some intent here to give this should be symbolic of ruling over the entire Jewish people. In other words, that's the number 12 because there are 12 tribes. So that's why they chose 12 people. But it was a tragic outcome. And as we know in Perkei Avos, it says, Avera geireres Avera, one sin leads to another. And ultimately became a major war, and the Civil War, where we said that there were 20 people of David's army were killed, and 360 people were killed from Ishbosheth's army. Is that right? 360? And that was a very sad 360, yes, verse 31. And anyway, and what ended up happening was Asael was killed because Asael tried to kill Avner, and Avner had no choice but self-defense. Now, there is a whole discussion because the brothers of Asael, Yoav and Avishai, are very angry at Avner. Why are they angry at Avner? Because Avner killed their brother, Asael. Now, Asael tried to kill Avner, and Avner killed him first. So, did he do something wrong? Did Avner really do something wrong? Should they really want to kill Avner for killing Asael? Asael, he had no choice. Avner had no choice. It was self-defense. This was a matter of self-defense. Was there something really wrong? And what this really boils down to is that could Avner have killed have, instead of killing Asael, could he have maimed him or stopped him by destroying one of his limbs, but not killing him? Would there have been a way for him to, to maybe not kill him? And could he have accomplished what he needed to save his life without killing him? And this boils down to a discussion in the laws of self-defense. If one person is running after another person to kill them, you are supposed to stop the murderer. Now, if you are able to stop the murderer, anyone outside, any outsider is supposed to stop a murderer. If you're able to stop the murderer by shooting at his leg, then you're not allowed to kill him. You have to shoot at the leg. If you can, no choice, and you have no choice. There's only one position that you could shoot at, and it's basically going to kill him. Then you do that. But if you're able to save him with, if you're able to save the person being chased after, if you're able to save him with just shooting at the leg, then you're obligated to shoot at the leg. So here, Avner killed the Asael. Yoav and Avishai are claiming that Avner should have just stopped him. They could have broken his leg, broken his arm, whatever. They could have, done something to stop the murderer from killing him. Now, however, there is a question. This law that you're supposed to try to save, save the life of the murderer and just stop him in his steps. Does this apply to the person being chased after? If you're being chased after, does that apply to you as well? Do you need to try to save the life of the murderer, or does this just apply to all the other people? But you,
Rabbi,
yes,
Tashlem Hargo, kill him first before he kills you.
Yes, but does that apply if you don't have to kill him? That's if you need to kill him.
What about if he comes back and tries to kill him again?
So this is the story. If you have the ability, again, if you have the ability to stop him in his plans by shooting at his leg, and you could save yourself, are you obligated to? An outsider is obligated to. But does this law apply to the nirdaf, to the person being chased after also? Now, I'm not telling you, if you have an intruder in your house, you just shoot 100 bullets, just get the guy, just save your life. Don't take this practically to start having mercy on some terrorist or some, you know what I mean? Shoot.
But that's
shoot to
different.
kill.
I mean, Rabbi.
But here we're learning about the story here, and we're learning halacha of, with amongst other Jews, and so on. This is not a case of a murder. If you have a terrorist, don't take any lessons from here. You have to go and shoot as many as you can. But when we're dealing here with another Yid who's, it's an issue of halacha where you have to be careful, and about someone else's life. So here there is room to say that maybe this might have been the debate between Avner and the brothers of Asael. Anyway, this is one thought that goes. This is one way of understanding this issue. The other way is, was it possible? Maybe it wasn't possible to save the life, to be able just to stop Asael from killing him. Maybe he had no other choice, and maybe he tried. It does say that he used the backside of the spear, which means he maybe tried not to kill him. He tried to stop him. So that might be another understanding.
Yeah, I'll come down when you ring. Okay.
But on the other hand, it says some spears have a sharp point at their at the end of their handle, and so maybe that's the pshat. The Radak seems to understand it that way, that it's actually a sharp end. And
Oh, no, just call me.
I was very curious about this part. That's why I looked it up, and it says that if you hit a person under the fifth rib, this is absolutely the fastest way to kill someone, that it hits exactly the major part of a human body, and it's no other way but just the death of this person. That's why I think that it's a very important part that he was hit under the fifth rib.
right.
And that's why in the revenge, Abner was killed the same way, because it's well known. I was very curious, and I went to see a medical proof of it. It happened to be the most vulnerable, the most pain, the most difficult
Right.
thing
Right,
to
right.
hit on the human body. And so it's kind of, it proves
So,
that
right.
I have a question as well.
Just 1 second, Robert. So it does seem like what Anna's saying is correct. The commentaries seem to think that the back of the spear, they seem to understand that that is a sharp part, where it's another alternative way of killing someone is using the back part. So it doesn't seem like he was trying to save the life. I don't see any other commentaries here, at least in front of me, that maybe have another thought. But I was just mentioning that maybe, if we look further, maybe we'll find someone who might have a thought that maybe there is such an understanding, that he maybe tried to save him. And of course, the brothers will never believe that, but that would be an interesting thought. But of course, the simple understanding is, as Anna is saying it, that he did try to kill him. And this is part of the issue here that they're going to have, that they want to kill Avner as a matter of revenge, Goyel Hadam, redeeming the brothers. Okay, yes, Robert.
Robert, I get a couple of minutes ago, you used two phrases within one sentence. One was conflict between Jews, and halakha, and essentially halakha essentially dictates you as a Jew in conflict with another Jew. You should not kill them, but at least stop them. Like you said, shoot them in the leg. So is that something that is a law, to say when there's, because of halakha, if two Jews are in conflict, you should save his life in saving yourself by, shooting him in the leg, or, wounding him, then killing him?
I believe so. I believe that's the final halacha, but okay. I guess I should look it up to be sure.
But it's interesting because I never really realized that if there is such a value for that. So it's sort of interesting for what I picked up in that. Yeah, it would be good to know that we're obligated to save a Jewish life by saving ourselves, so we at least have to stop them and then not kill them in the process. I wish we'd tell our police that every once in a while as well. That's my political commentary. But anyways.
Okay. Very good. Okay, did anyone else, Ezra wanted to know where we're up to. We were just going over chapter 2, Ezra. So we're going to start chapter 3 momentarily.
If I can say something, Rabbi, about this whole thing of trying to save somebody's life when they're trying to kill you. If somebody comes in front of my house and they threaten me, I'm going to shoot them, but I'm going to have to drag them into my yard, because otherwise I've committed a murder in the eyes of the law. As long as they're inside my yard, I'm protecting myself.
You haven't done this yet, Susan, have you?
Not yet.
I'm just telling you something that I know, because my dad was in the gun business, and I know a lot about that stuff. But anyway, the point is, what is morally correct and what is the proper thing to do? Who knows?
But I was talking about Jew between Jew. Right. I mean, somebody who is Jewish relative to an altercation between, or anger between, two Jews. And there is a halakha. Yeah. It's a differentiation.
We could look it up. It's definitely, written there in halacha. I just don't have it in front of me this second. I don't want to keep everyone waiting. But I believe that is the halacha. Okay, so we're going to continue now. chapter 3. So the final conclusion of chapter 2 was that they carried Asael, buried him in his father's burial plot, Beis Lechem, and Yoav and his men walked all night, and light broke upon them at Hebron. And then comes chapter 3, and chapter 3 is the war was long between the house of Shaul and the house of David. David grew continuously stronger, while the house of Shaul grew continuously weaker. And that's what we see seeming to happen here, where Shaul is going downhill and David is going uphill. And it mentions the children of David. Sons were born to David in Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon, born to Achinoam of Achinoam HaYisraelis. And his second son was Kilov, and he was born to Abigail, who was the former wife of Naval from Carmel. I don't know if you remember, but we had that story of Abigail, Naval, and then the third was Avshalom, the son of Maacha, the daughter of Talmai Melech Geshur. And so
there was also a Talmai Melech Mitzrayim.
Right, it was like the name Paroi, Talmai.
It's a family, yeah.
Yeah, Talmai Hamelech. There's a story in the Gemara about Talmai where they translated the Torah. 72 great rabbis, Maisa Talmai Hamelech, right? So the story of so Naval was married to Abigail, and Naval refused to give food to David's army, David's people, when David was running away from Shaul. And Abigail went there and stopped David. David almost went to kill Naval, and Abigail sort of saved David from transgressing, because David thought he was king and he had the right to kill Naval. And Abigail, who was considered a prophetess, she was a Neviah, and she came and told David off. And told him that he's wrong halachically. He doesn't have the right yet to kill someone for being married b'malchus. But she brought food and everything and gave to David. Ultimately, David married her after Naval died, and she told David, she said, Naval's not going to live that long, and you don't have to worry about it. And sure enough, he died. And it calls him from Carmel. The reason it calls him from Carmel, he had two places. He worked in one area and he lived in another area. Whenever anyone asked for charity from him, he used to say, "Oh, I give charity in the place where I live. I don't give charity here where I work." And then when you went to him where he lived, he says, "Oh, I give all my charity from my office where I live, where I work. I don't do charity from here. I give all my charity to the locals over there where I, And so he always so anyway. Ultimately, he died, and now Abigail had a son from David, and the name is Kilov. And this Kilov was actually known to never sin, never did an Aveira in his life. And Kilov, the reason why he was called Kilov, Rashi brings down over here that the jokers of the day used to claim this Kilov is not a child of David and Abigail. He's really a child of Naval and Abigail. He's really a child of the previous husband. And she got pregnant from her husband Naval, and this child is so it says that Hashem made a miracle. Kilov, he looked like his father. Kilov, he looked like David. Hashem made a miracle that he made his face look exactly like David. So this would disprove. It would disprove any of these jokers and these people mocking him. And the Gemara in Brachas, we had a Gemara many months ago in the beginning of Brachas that it says he was Kilov, he was machalim. He would embarrass the face of Mephibosheth in halacha. He was such a scholar that he would embarrass Mephibosheth in halacha. Now, it's interesting that he is considered a tzaddik that never sinned. There were 4 people, it says, that never sinned. One of them was Yishai, David's father. Kilov is David's son, who's the son of Abigail, David and Abigail. And another person who didn't sin is Amram, father of Moses. And the other one is Benjamin. Benjamin says never sinned.
Rabbi?
What's interesting is all these 4 people were very close to some of the most major people in our history.
Rabbi?
Just one second, Felice.
Okay.
David is David's Yishai was close to David, so David made major turnover in the Jewish world, and Yishai was his father who never sinned. Shlomo HaMelech, major king, and his brother was Kilov. Benjamin and Benjamin and Yosef was a major leader of Klal Yisrael, of Noyhe Katsoin Yosef. We are the sheep of Joseph. It calls all of Klal Yisrael, and Joseph supported the entire Jewish people, and yet, and Yosef's brother Benjamin never sinned, and Amram and Moshe. Moshe was the leader of all of Klal Yisrael, and his father never sinned. So it seems like there's some connection between the people who never sinned and yet the one related to them who maybe sinned or maybe did some here and there, did something that might have been questionable, but they accomplished so much. Like it seems like there is some lesson here that maybe, the fact that someone sins or has done, at least they're accomplishing, maybe they've accomplished certain things. It seems like there's some lesson by the fact that they're next to someone, placed all of these 4 people, they're placed next to someone who made such major accomplishments in their life. Yes, Yehuda.
I had a question also.
I'm sorry, you're right. You're first. Yehuda, I have to put you on hold for 1 second. Felice had a question, please.
Yes. I may be mistaken, but I always thought that Caleb, which is very similar in name to Kilab, Caleb, one of the 12 who went to check out Israel, was one of the 2 who spoke in favor of going ahead with the conquest of Israel. And I was always under the impression that he was one of the 4 who had never sinned. But am I wrong? Was I mistaken and they were referring instead to Kilab?
I don't know of him being counted, but we could look it up and see if there's any source. I like to try to find my students to be right. So maybe I'll try to look into it, see if we could find you to be correct. Okay.
Caleb, one of the ones who spoke.
I don't know of it. Again, I didn't see it, and I don't recall such a thing. But we could look into it, see if there's any other opinions. All right.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, Yehuda.
Yes. Yeah. You said Moshe's father never sinned, but what about when he was thinking of separating from his wife and Miriam stopped him?
Good question.
That's an interesting question. We don't know that that's really a sin, what he did. He thought one way at one point, and then he thought the other way was correct. So, doesn't mean it's a sin. In fact, it actually shows his humility that he accepted what his daughter said and decided to follow his new way of understanding that this is the appropriate thing. So, doesn't seem like it would be counted as a sin. You know what I mean? It was
Yeah. Okay.
Rabbis have had changes of views in halacha even you find such a thing, and it doesn't mean the first way they sinned. It means they thought one way, and now they decide reevaluated, and they think something else. Okay, so yes, David.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that the only one that's known as a tzaddik outwardly is Yosef, and he's not even one of the four.
Yosef HaTzadik, right. That's interesting. Mordechai HaTzadik, Yosef HaTzadik, right. There's certain ones. Shimon HaTzadik. There are a few people we call tzaddiks, but the word tzaddik, which even according to the translation given in Tanya, which is a very high level of tzaddik, normally the simple translation of tzaddik means that they are righteous and they have majority mitzvahs. That's the simple translation. But in the Tanya, it gives a very extreme translation, and it says that what we call tzaddik is just a borrowed term, and it's not the real term. The real term tzaddik is someone who never sinned and never will sin. And even that term doesn't really mean that they never sinned. It means they've reached a level where they never would sin and never will sin in the future. But it doesn't mean, and in fact, it gives an example of David. King David, who actually did, there's questionable things that he did, and yet he is the one who hargoi b'tainus, he killed his Yetzer Hara through fasting. So you see the concept of that a tzaddik doesn't mean that they actually never sinned. It means that they've reached such a level where they removed all evil from within them, and they will never sin on the level that they're at, based on the fact that they've destroyed their evil inclination, so on. Okay.
But we say that by David HaMelech, that he did that.
Right. Harga b'tainus, he killed it. Yeah. Okay. Looks like Robert. Yes.
I'm curious. Is that in one of the notes on the bottom references the Kilab's real name was Daniel? So the question is, why was it a reason for that? And does he appear as Daniel later on in the narrative or in any stories? And why would they give him that name when others don't seem to have that?
No, so we said that he was given an extra name, Kilov, when people would make fun of him, that he was from Naval, and so really he had another name, and the name Kilov was sort of like an additional name that was given to him because of this.
Okay, now I understand. So to protect you from the evil eye, right? So you.
The fact that they called him that was sort of like a reminder of the fact that this miracle happened.
Yeah, I got
so
it.
they gave him, that God made his face. All of a sudden, he started looking like his father.
Okay.
Ezra, did you put something on the chat? But did you want to say something, or I didn't really see what you wrote there, or so it? Was it you?
No, to answer Felice.
Oh.
I went online and I put a link to something from Midrashet Moriah. It says in an explanation I was given by, give me a second and I'll tell you who it was that stated it, by Mrs. Sefa Kirschblom. She writes that the Gemara in Baba Batra 17a, there it says that the rabbis taught that there were 4 people who died never having sins: Binyamin, Amram, Yishai, and Kilab, the son of David.
Oh, okay. So that's the source of this statement, but it doesn't. So there we could look it up to see if there's any other version. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ezra. Yeah, that's good. Okay. No other questions. Let's move forward. So. Actually, Kilov is from Kulai Av. He was completely like his father. From that's the word. That's the 2 words. I didn't explain the word, the text Kilov. It means Kulai Av. It's all like his father. Okay. Now, it's interesting, the Gemara does mention that Kilav spent all of his time studying Torah. He had no interest in becoming king after his father. The Gemara, there's a Gemara that mentions this. Okay, so so that's the story of Kilav, and then we have the story of Avshalom, the son of Maacha, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur, and that is a interesting story itself, because this is a case where we find in the Torah about marrying a Yefas Toyar, a captive, and this is Macha. She was a captive, and the law is that a person is allowed to marry a soldier, goes to war, is allowed to marry a non-Jewish captive, and the reason is because the Torah says that he won't be able to control himself, so we can't prohibit such a thing, because Dibra Torah keneged Yetzer Hara. The Torah speaks against the evil inclination. It says it's going to be impossible to tell him not to. So therefore, we are allowing him to have, in different opinions, exactly what that means. He's not going to marry her. He's going to have relations with her once, and then afterwards, if she is willing to go through the whole process and she wants to become Jewish, he will, and it's a whole procedure before he can have relations with her. She has to cry for her parents 30 days and so on. It's a whole procedure. She has to look ugly. We have to, she has to, he's not allowed to have relations right away with her. It waits 30 days. It's a whole procedure. But the law is that a Yefas Tayar is permissible. That is one example of the Torah permitting something even though it doesn't want to. And there's a discussion, of course, in the commentaries, and that maybe such a person that does this does need to do tshuva, because it's not really Hashem's ultimate will, even though Hashem allows it. But do you need to do tshuva if you marry a Yefas Toyar? Yefas Toyar literally means a beautiful appearance. That's literally what Yefas Toyar means. Someone of beautiful appearance. And what it refers to is someone who's a soldier in an army and they capture women, they sort of feel, there's some feeling that they have that they won't be able to control themselves if you tell them they're not allowed to have relations with that Yefas Toyar. Now, terrible things happen because of this marriage. In other words, David's child, Avshalom, ended up making a whole rebellion. So it's not like the child was some righteous child that ended up coming out of this union. Basically, there is also a story of Avshalom's sister, who was Tamar, who ended up being raped by Amnon. And that's another story as well that happened. And ultimately, one of Tamar's claims to Amnon was, we are actually allowed to get married together legally. Why are you raping me? Because we could actually marry each other, because I'm not exactly your sister. I'm from a Yefas Tayar marriage, and ultimately there should be permissible for us to be married. And so this is the here we're not talking about Tamar, we're talking about Avshalom, the brother, and the mother was Macha. She was married to David Hamelech, and she's the daughter of Talmai. And the fourth of David's children that it mentions here is Adoniyahu, or Adoniah, and he's the son of Chagis. And then it mentions the fifth was Sheph. The fourth was Adoniah, the son of Chagis. The fifth was Shvatia, the son of Avital. The sixth was Yisraam, born to Eglah, Ashes David, the wife of David. And that's also very interesting. These were born to David in Hebron. Now, who is this Eglah? So the Gemara says that Eglah is Michal, the daughter of Shaul. Now, we know about David was married to Michal way back. And when Shaul started chasing after David to kill him, Michal ended up being taken away from David, and she was given to Palti ben Laish. She was given to another man. And there's a whole discussion. This is in chapter 25 of Shmuel Aleph. There's a whole discussion as to, was she allowed to be married to Palti if she was a married woman to David? And here the question gets even stronger, that David is now David's wife. It says this is the wife of David. How is she the wife of David? Now, we'll soon see how David ends up remarrying this. David ends up remarrying this Michal, and the question is, how is that? How is David remarrying Michal if she was married to another man in the interim? So there's a lot of questions about this marriage. David was married to Michal. I don't know if you remember, but this was connected to the story of Goliath. When David chose to take on the challenge of fighting Goliath, Shaul promised his daughter will be given over to whoever fights Goliath. David took the challenge. And not only that, he had promised a lot of wealth. And so David ended up killing Goliath. And all of a sudden, something went strange, and Shaul was not giving his daughter. And that was the daughter Meirav. And in the end, Meirav married someone else. And so Shaul finally agreed to give Michal to David. David married her, and she actually helped David at one point later escape. She helped David escape at one point. Anyway, ultimately, she ended up Shaul took her away and had her marry someone else, and now seems to be back with David. Now, there are a number of issues. Even if you want to say that she got a divorce from David, so let's say she got a divorce from David, but then she married this Palti. Is she allowed to marry David again after she had a divorce from David and married? In the interim, she married another man. Even if she got a divorce now from that man and married David afterwards, would that be allowed? No, it's prohibited in the Torah. You can't, once a woman gets married to a different man, she can't go back to the first man and be with him anymore, marry him anymore. Otherwise, you could legally just live with all different types of women. Just marry them, marry, divorce. You go back and forth, back and forth. You can legally commit adultery because you just marry people and divorce them and marry the first one back. That would be like legal adultery. It's illegal. It's not allowed. The Torah doesn't allow such a thing. And
but David ran away. He couldn't give her a divorce. She helped him run away, but there was no divorce. Shaul just decided to give her to somebody else.
So according to your way,
just like he did with his first daughter.
Yeah, but Meirav was not married then.
I know, but still he promised her to David.
So that's a promise. That's one thing. He sort of had a commitment there. But here, maybe he annulled it. He annulled his, he went to annul his vow. But here, this was a marriage.
Yeah.
This is a real marriage. And marrying her to another man, I mean, the child will be a mamzer. That's not so simple.
Yeah.
That would make the children mamzerim. So it's not simple at all. So this is of course a big discussion. I'm just going to share with you before we conclude. I'll just share with you one explanation, and that is that one of the ways of understanding this is Shaul promised her to David on the condition that David had to bring 100 circumcisions of Plishtim that he kills. In other words, he's got to kill 100 Plishtim, enemies of the Jewish people. And if he kills 100 Plishtim, he can bring their circumcisions, and David will be able to marry Michal. Now, Shaul also promised a lot of wealth to David when he killed Goliath. So Shaul owes David money now, right? There's a loan there. There's money that he owes, and David has given to Shaul. He's given 100 circumcisions. Now, when you marry a woman, you have to give. We know it as a ring, right? Now, what did David use as his way of acquiring a wife? What was David's method? Normally you use like a ring. We use solid gold. We don't use a diamond. We use solid gold nowadays to marry. When you want to get married, it's a piece of solid gold with no writing on it. And that's what's used generally as the ring. You say Harei at Mikudeshes li, and in fact, tonight there'll be a lot of weddings. It's Lag Ba'omer tonight. So the normal way of marriage is you have to give something that's at least a shavar prud, that's be at least worth, a dime or so. And that is how you acquire. That's how marriage is. Now, of course, it's worth a lot more than a dime. Now, what did David use to acquire Michal? So either he used the circumcision pieces. That was what he was using as, that's what Shaul told him. Give me these, you can be married to my daughter. So either he was using that as money of acquiring this girl. And if he was using that, then the question is, how much is circumcision pieces worth? So Shaul annulled the marriage. He said, this marriage is not a real marriage. I'm taking Michal back because that has no value. And David said, what do you mean? You could feed it to dogs and cats. They'll eat it as meat. So this was a debate between Shaul and David. So David felt that he's still married to her, and the marriage was good. And David felt that it's not good. Another way of understanding it is Shaul owed David money. And so Shaul said, oh, you think you're marrying her because I owe you money, and you're just letting go of the loan. Letting go of a loan is like paying someone money, right? Because if you let go of a loan, in other words, Shaul owes David, $100,000. So David is being mevater. He's being Michael. He's letting go of the loan and saying, "Don't worry, you don't owe me." Letting go of not the loan, the owing this debt. I'm letting go of this debt. Yeah. What?
Or giving the debt.
Giving the debt. So that's like giving money. So Shaul said, you're not allowed to marry. That's not called money. Forgiving a debt is not marriage. David had in mind in other words, David gave two things. He forgave the debt and he gave the pieces of the circumcision. So David had in mind, I'm marrying with the pieces of the circumcision. Shaul said, no, if he's got two things, he probably had in mind forgiving the debt. Forgiving the debt is not kosher. That's not a kosher marriage. And therefore, this was the debate between Shaul and David. And Shaul felt that he must have had in mind forgiving the debt, and that's not acceptable. And David had in mind, no, I know you can't. Forgiving the debt isn't good. I had in mind the circumcision. And therefore, there was this debate. And therefore, David all along felt that this marriage was a kosher marriage. Shaul's verdict was that it's not a kosher marriage. And therefore, she was allowed. And ultimately, David's view was the accepted view. And we also learned the medrash that she never had relations with Palti ben Laish. and he ultimately he was the epitome of someone who had self-control, that they lived together without ever having relations. And the Tosfos asks, how could they live together? It's yichud. You're not allowed to be together in a room, a private room. So Tosfos says that they always lived with their entrance to the Rishus Harabim, to the public fair, public way, and this way they never lived in private. They never had a private. But ultimately, he never had relations with her. Anyway, so she ultimately was still married to David, and we'll see more about that. Okay, well, sorry for taking up a little extra of your time. Sei gesund. Have a wonderful day, wonderful evening, a happy Lag BaOmer. Enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Stay
Thank you,
safe,
Rabbi.
everybody.
Happy
Hey.
Lag BaOmer.
Bye.